Hey guys, I'm April from Giggle Glitter Graphics, and this is part one of my page decorating tutorial for my haunted house journal. Now, I started off with all of my pieces already cut out. I inked everything around the edges just to save some time. I'm using all of the printable kits from the Haunted House collection, as well as a few additional ones, and you can find links to those in the description down below. The first thing I felt I really needed to do was to get a portrait over this piano. When I saw the page go by, I was just like, oh, we need a painting over this. So I grabbed one of the fussy cuts from the journal kit, and I'm adding some backer paper to it. This is a coffee dyed paper that I used a stencil on. It's a little hard to see in the video, but there is like kind of a design in the coffee stain, and I might have to do a video on that in the future. But I put some backer paper on, realized that I forgot to put my ribbon. I've made a little loop at the top of the ribbon, so it's like a tab that will poke up out of the top, and I'm just gonna glue that in between the two layers with some Fabri-Tac. I wanted this painting to kind of hang down over the piano, but I wanted to put kind of a secret surprise on the back. I'm adding a little bit of ink to the edges, and then I'm going to grab some little fussy cuts from the Snippets kit. I've got a letter and kind of a little tarot card type thing and a key, and I wanted it to feel like a hidden secret behind the painting. And this is something that I ended up repeating throughout the journal with all 4 of the portraits that come in the Haunted House Junk Journal kit. I wanted that kind of cohesiveness, and I wanted to feel like you were finding out secrets about each of these people as you explored the house. Once my portrait is done, I'm going to hang it over my piano. I'm just going to tack it at the top with a little Fabri-Tac, but I wanted to make sure that there was enough space that you could kind of twist the painting and see the things on the back of it without it kind of just dangling freely and flopping all over the place. So I'm going to do the facing page as well. I'm just adding a pocket from the Junk Journal kit, and then I grabbed this little strip to use as a mini belly band that kind of starts at the top of the page and then tucks right down into the pocket. I wanted to kind of layer it up and do something a little different. Next, I do this tiny little tag with a dates label. And I do end up adding a stamp to this tag, and I missed that on the video. I did a little bit of a partial stamp on it just to kind of finish it off. And then there's still room for a cute little note or something like that. I finish it off with some burlap, and this is going to tuck right inside of this little belly band. I'm just going to carefully measure and add glue to the areas that I want to be attached to the page so that I have a little spot to just slide my tag inside. I grab a couple of ephemera pieces to tuck into my pocket, and I've decided to add a little ribbon to one of my tags. I had some scraps on my table just from trimming off the fabrics that went on the cover, and they're all raggedy and kind of messed up, and I love that. So I got a piece of the upholstery fabric and a little bit of lace and just tied them on there as best I could, and I like how this little raggedy string came out on the top of that. I add my tag and a little cluster to the bottom of the pocket, again using scraps left over from working on the cover. I'm going to finish that off with a button from the add-on kit and glue it all down with some Fabri-Tac. For just a little more texture, I grab a piece of shreddy cheesecloth and add that to the top of the belly band. Now moving on to my next spread, I decided to do a kitchen theme on this one, and I have one of the room pages from the Haunted House Papers kit, and I'm just folding over a part of it to be a tuck on the page. So I kind of measure that out, place it again, and then decide where I want to fold over so I can do a pull out so you can see the whole room. I ended up settling on trying to center up that ceiling fixture. I liked how that looked, so I find that, give it a good crease, and then decide how I want to kind of fix up that edge on the left-hand side. While I'm thinking about that, I round the corners. And then go into my lace bin and grab a piece of lace to put along that edge. And once I tuck it under, I realized that it's just too clean. And it's also going to flop around a little bit when I turn the pages. So I grab one of the labels from the journal kit and a paper clip. And while I'm kind of mulling that over, I circle back to that edge and use some decorative scissors to kind of rough it up, and grab my vintage photo distress ink and end up inking around all of the edges and the creases on this entire panel, front and back. And I really like how that came out. It made it more cohesive with the rest of the pages in the journal. I'm attaching my lace with some Fabri-Tac. Get that all lined up so that I have lots of lace peeking out from the edge. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue this panel in. I want to tuck, so I'm just going to glue on 3 sides so that one side is still open. And then place that carefully into my journal so that it's fitting well on the page, but the pull-out action is still going to work nicely. Next, I grab some ephemera pieces and choose this one from the Notes and Letters kit. It has herbs listed on it, and I thought that was perfect for this kitchen scene. And then I finally get an idea of how I want to do my paper clip. So I grab a sheet of, this is book page from an Italian to English dictionary. I want it to be a little thicker, so I use my Uhu glue stick and kind of glue it to itself to make a thicker piece of paper. I'm going to slide my paper clip over it with the short end facing up, and then glue my label on top of that just to cover up the paper clip. Now, you see me inking the back of this. I thought I was going to end up trimming nice and neat all around the outside so that you had the book paper on the back and the label on the front. And then I was like, what am I doing? This is a haunted house. This should be all raggedy and weird. So I stopped that plan and I end up tearing all of the edges off, getting a nice rough edge. I really like how this came out, and I repeated it for a lot of other labels throughout the journal. I then ink the edges with my vintage photo distress ink and leave the top of the paper clip kind of poking out so that I can put ribbon on it. And I'm just cutting a piece of this kind of vintage print ribbon. I'm using a lot of the same fabrics throughout the journal, and this one really I felt suited the theme that I had going here. And I'm just going to pull that through, and that's my paper clip. It's going to keep things from kind of flying around whenever you're turning the pages. I finished this off by tucking a room description bookmark. This is the kitchen description from the bookmarks kit, and this rough recipe from the Notes and Letters kit inside of the tuck. I also grabbed this kind of grocery list. I thought it was fun, the idea of this postcard being used as a grocery list at some point. Maybe it's been around for a while, it's all stained. And I add a couple little bits and bobs. I'm using a tiny fussy cut from the Snippets kit and an extra piece from the add-on kit to make a little cluster at the top. And now I'm deciding it's not rough enough, so I just rip that edge off, that little corner off, ink it up, and I am much happier with that in my journal than a nice, neat piece of paper. For the finishing touch, I'm grabbing a bulb pin, a little scrap of fabric, and a charm. It looks kind of like a coin, and I just poke that directly through all of the paper and let that hang for a bit of extra texture. I'm really happy with how this kitchen spread came out. I think it's like people just left their belongings behind, and it was super satisfying. At this point, my brain needed a little bit of a break, so I grabbed one of the belly bands from the journal kit, and I'm just trimming it down so it'll fit on my page. I have torn the edges on every single page in this journal, so they're a little shorter than usual, so my belly band was a little long. I add some ink to the bottom, glue that in at the top and bottom, and now I need something to go inside. So I decided to grab some mulberry paper. I got this paper off of Amazon, and it is beautiful. I will try to link that down below along with other supplies that I'm using. It has all these little threads in it, and I'm just cutting it down to the right width to make an envelope to tuck under there. So I'm going to fold the sides in. I'm going to fold up the bottom so that it fits on the page nicely. Then I'm going to fold the top down to make the upper flap. After that, I could just cut out the 4 little corners, and that's going to give me my envelope shape. For a little bit of finishing on this envelope, I decided to cut angles on the inside flaps, as well as use a corner rounding punch to kind of round those top corners on both the flap and the body of the envelope. It was a little hard to use that punch because of the threads in the paper, but it worked well enough. A little Oohoo glue stick, a little bit of ink, and then I decide I really need to add something else to this. So I grab a piece of black lace and go to the sewing machine and just kind of stitch that on really quickly. I really like how that came out. There's some movement now, and I like how it overlaps the candle. And now I have a great place to stash some ephemera. Next, I'm moving into the conservatory. I'm using some tickets from the add-on kit, as well as a black rose from the Gothic Flowers Fussy Cuts kit. And I'm just keeping the left side of this spread pretty simple. On the right-hand side, I've already made one of those paper clips using the conservatory label and using the same method I did for the kitchen. I also grab this bookmark, add a little text to it just to make it a bit different, and a couple other pieces of ephemera. I have a flower mystic card as well as a tag from the add-on kit, and I'm just going to punch a hole in the top center of each one of these. To hook them together, I'm going to get a Tim Holtz long fastener and thread that through all of them. I did play with the order a little bit and found that I liked the dark card in between the 2 tan cards a little better. It pops a bit more, so I rearranged those really quickly. I got my fastener through and spread out the little arms on the back. And then to hide that, I'm going to get a little bit of lace and apply that to the top back of the bookmark just to kind of hide the arms of the fastener and add a little bit of texture to the top of this little pivoty ephemera piece. To add some interest, I grabbed these faux wax seal stickers and add one of those on, and then I decided that wasn't enough by itself, so I added a label from the add-ons kit as well as a little leaf fussy cut from the Snippets kit, and I feel like that really was a nice finishing touch. It was much more interesting than just leaving all of the tags blank for journaling. I'm going to go ahead and use my paper clip to secure this onto the page, and then looking it over, I decided that that left-hand side needed a little bit more embellishment. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a corner stamp. This is kind of a Victorian set of stamps, and I use my vintage photo distress ink and just add some rough little stampings in the corners of that left-hand side, and I felt like that was a nice finish for this spread. Here I've grabbed my snippet roll that I made in an earlier video. This is made using the Snippets and Clusters kit, the Haunted House kit. And I'm just kind of trimming around a couple of elements on this big long strip so that I can make a side tuck out of it. I'm going to ink that raw edge just to blend it in a little bit and then glue this on 3 sides to make a tuck pocket. This is overhanging the edge of the page a little bit, so I went ahead, flipped it over, put some distress ink on the back of that so that the white wasn't so bright. And then I'm just going to grab a piece of lace from my stash and glue that to the edge of the page just for some more texture. I love texture in this book. And to further cover those little pieces that are sticking out. I also noticed I had a scrap of doily left over. This is paper doily on my table, and I thought it would be really cute right on the top of this mini page. It was the perfect size. I hardly had to trim it, and I really like how that looks there. Now I'm just going to grab a couple pieces of ephemera. I have a letter and a photo, and that finishes that page. For this next page, I'm just grabbing a pocket from the journal kit, and again, it's a little wide, so I'm going to go ahead and tear both of these sides on this, add some ink, and glue it in. And then for the top of this page, I'm getting a piece of cut off of the upholstery fabric that I've been using throughout the journal and just adding a strip of that. It has a little bit of a pinking sheer edge. And then I grab some spooky text from the journal kit and I'm going to add that right on top of that. I like how it kind of matted it out and made a title at the top of the page. A couple pieces of ephemera for the pocket, and then I realized they need a little bit of pizzazz. So this is a cutoff of that really pretty mulberry paper I used to make the envelope earlier. And I'm just making a tab out of that. I do a little decorative scissor cut and then ink all of the edges. A couple of dots of glue on either end of that, and I have a tab for my journal card. But I don't think this is enough. It's still kind of plain on the page and I didn't want to add any more elements. So I go into my stamps and I get this kind of handwritten letter stamp and I'm going to add some of that in vintage photo ink. And then on top of that, I'm going to do black ink with kind of this plant flower stamp. And I like that a lot better. It added some texture without me having to put a ton of things on the page. I feel like a cluster would finish this off really nicely, so I get some of that cheesecloth and I layered it up with a couple of little tiny fussy cuts from the Snippets kit. I have a leaf and one of those tarot card-esque type images, and I felt like that kind of finished it off nicely. I'm tearing the edge on the photo of the portrait just to rough it up a bit, and I'm pretty satisfied with that. For the little page, I get this paper doily that I've already put vintage photo ink on, and I want to combine it with this gothic flowers fussy cut. So I just ink up the edges after I tear it, use my glue stick to attach that down, add a little stamp for some more interest there in the top left corner, and glue my fussy cut down. And I thought that came out really cute and it made a nice layer with that poisonous potion bottle on the back side. Now I'm going to jump back to the front cover of my journal and put some things in this inside pocket. I've got some ephemera, the entry description card, and a couple thrift store finds. A key that was gold and I put some watered down black paint on, and a doily, an old vintage doily. And I'm going to make a pouch out of this doily to fit this house card, this little house photo, and my key. So use the photo as kind of a measuring guide and fold up my little pouch. I secure the sides with some binder clips. And then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and just do a quick little zigzag stitch kind of tack on either side to hold it in place. Now I can slip my photo and my key down inside as kind of an invitation to my haunted house and put that in my front pocket. For my next page, I decided to make kind of like a little notepad. I'm going back to my snippet strip. This one has clusters on it, and I'm just tearing out one of the clusters that I want to use and adding some ink around the edges. This is going to make a topper for my notepad. And for my papers, I am using a coffee dyed paper, and I'm just going to tear that down to be the largest piece in my little notepad. And then I go back to my mulberry paper packet. It's a variety pack, and there is a black and then another kind of plant life page that I pick from that pack. And I thought they layered up really nicely, brought in those dark colors and textures. And I'm just going to staple those together and then glue the whole thing in so that this notepad is tucked right under that top. But I'm also going to insert that topper so that it is also a tuck. So if I want to add some more pages in later or tuck something else up inside of there, I can do that. I've decided to backtrack through the journal back to that page with the teddy bear on the chair, and I'm going to insert a corner pocket from the add-on kit. On top of this, I'm going to decorate with a scrap of paper from the Snippets kit, as well as a paper doily that I've put vintage photo distress ink all over. And then I get into all my little bits and bobs and pick a photo as well as another piece of text from the journal kit. I started getting this story in my head about maybe a little boy and then like a little girl ghost and maybe their friends, and I don't know where I was going with this page, but to me there is definitely a little story here. So I've got my photo, a little bit of cheesecloth underneath my "Who's There" text. And then I'm going to grab a few pieces of ephemera. I have a journal card from the Haunted House kit, a Mystics card, and then a notes and letters kind of rough letter. Again, I felt like that journal card needed some embellishment, so I grabbed a couple pieces of lace and sewed them together to make a tab. I trimmed the edges because it came out a little bit thick and was pretty happy with the effect of this. I then went into my stamped paper bin. This is just a bin full of pieces of paper that I've pre-stamped images on. And I grabbed one with a little bit of a floral. And I'm just going to ink the heck out of it so that it has an older look. Because right now it's just on white paper, which is why I like these little bits and bobs, because then I can finish them off to match the project that I'm working on at the time. So I'm just stapling that on, and then I'm going to apply my little lace tab over the top just to finish it off. And that wasn't enough. So I'm going to go back into those kind of Victorian style stamps and add a little like bracket stamp onto the bottom. For a little more texture on the page, I go ahead and grab that Mystic card and a scrap of my upholstery fabric I've used throughout my journal. This one has the pinking sheer edge on it, and I'm just going to quickly glue that on for another tab. And with that finishing touch, this spread is done. For my last page in this video, I'm going to visit the family cemetery. I've got an envelope here that came in the junk journal kit. It has a cemetery on it. And I'm just going to line the top of it with this Italian to English dictionary book page. I lined all of the envelopes in the kit with either washi tape or book pages or ephemera pages, just to give them a little more interest. For this one, you can see I just tore the paper off at the top because I'm going to fold that tab over the edge of the page and glue it down as a tuck. So I did not need to make it nice and neat. It was just going to be extra work. So I'm just going to pop that over the edge of the page. And I've decided to just glue this flap down entirely, and you'll see why here in a minute. I made a little change in direction with what the tuck was going to be on this page. So I'm just going to flip back. I have my family cemetery text from the journal kit, and I decided I wanted to build a little graveyard. There's a bunch of tombstones and mausoleums in the Snippet roll kit, and I thought these would be super cute lined up across the bottom of the page. But on their own, they weren't really strong enough, so I got another one of those cutoffs from making that mulberry paper envelope earlier, and I'm just going to run a strip of that right along the back. I added a little ink, but it was really hard to ink that piece of paper, so I kind of gave up partway through. I'm going to glue all of my little cemetery pieces down, and that came out adorable. I love it so much. For the top, underneath my text, I grab another piece of that gray fabric I have that has kind of all the vintage ledger paper stamping all over it. And I'm going to add a stamp to add another layer. I almost went for another piece of fabric or lace or something like that, but I decided that another one of those Victorian stamps here would have the same effect with a little less bulk, and I like how that came out. So after a little adjustment, I get my text down, and there's my header. We all know things can use a little more lace here and there. So for the edge of my envelope, I'm going to grab a little bit of lace and just apply that right along the edge for some added interest. And then inside, I'm going to tuck a few pieces of ephemera to discover on our exploration journey. And that finishes up this page. Now I'm going to flip this over and address the other side of the page. I want to cover up the flap of this envelope. I like the scalloped edge on it. So I got my snippet strip and I'm just going to tear another little piece off. And I had a piece with a mausoleum on it, again from the Snippet. This is all from the Snippets kit, all the things that are on here. And I'm going to kind of carefully cut around those. It can be a little fiddly when you get these really tight and continuous strips to get exactly what you want, but I managed to make it happen. And this is a shorter piece, so I still get those nice scalloped edges kind of framing it from that envelope flap. I'm going to add a little bit of paper doily for some texture, a little bit of ink on the edges to finish it off, and glue it all down. I felt the page still looked a little plain, so I got into my washi tape stash, and I have this really fun vintage kit. I will link it down below. I got it off of Amazon, and I got this music note washi tape, and I thought that was a nice addition to the top and bottom of the page to just kind of quickly visually finish it off without doing a whole bunch of extra work. And you can see here, I just glued my cluster on the left-hand side, and now I have a little tuck where I can put something in on the right if I want to. And that's it. That is the end of part 1 of my page decorating tutorial for my haunted house journal. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I decorated these pages. Keep an eye out for part 2. If you like and subscribe, you will be notified when the next part is available. You can also find links for all of the kits shown in this journal in the description down below. I sell them as printables in my Etsy shop. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.